So for the sake of time, I think we will get started. I know we have a few other guests that will be joining us this morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Marilyn Alms. I am the Executive Director with the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of our chamber, welcome to 2021 and the future of your business, HR Guidance. Please note that this event is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all registered attendees along with a post-event survey within the next few days. If you could turn on your camera, we love to see everyone's faces. I can understand if you're in a work environment and can't do so. Obviously, we look forward to a day when we can all come together in person, but for now, cameras are doing a good job. Just a couple of housekeeping items worth mentioning before we begin. Currently, we've asked you all to please be muted, and as a courtesy, stay muted. There will be a Q&A portion of the session at the end. You do see, we all have access to our chat box. If you are comfortable, you're welcome to start putting your questions in that chat box as they come to mind, but we will do our best to have our speakers answer those questions as they come through at the end of the question and answer period. Aside from that, thank you so much for being here today and for taking part in this wonderful workshop hosted by Peninsula. Just a couple of quick things to stress the importance. Thank you to our influencers who are our top tier members that are here today. We have the City of Airdrie, McKee Homes, and Vitreous Glass. If any of you could give us a wave, thank you so much for being here. Before they take the mic, we're very pleased to have a few of our local HR representatives here. We've invited Mike from Career Leap to say a few words just to explain a little bit more about the services that are available here within our community. Mike, if you can unmic yourself and say a few words, we'd appreciate that.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see everybody in brand new year 2021. So thank you. I am the program placement consultant for Career Leap. We're located in the Tower Lane Strip Mall between Great Clips and Liquor Depot. So that's our new location. We've been here since October of last year. Our program is geared towards people looking to transition to new or existing careers, utilizing their current skills and experiences. So we help with their job search, resume help, cover letter, interview preparation, and kind of help network within the business community to help find them employment as well. We're not a placement agency, but we help them with that job search. Also, my job is also to reach myself out there to business communities looking to help build some gaps in their employment to hire staff for shortfalls or whatever like that. So I'm out in the community trying to reach out to businesses, trying to keep everything local within Airdrie as well. Our program is geared towards people that currently collecting EI or have collected EI in the last 5 years. We help identify any gaps with career coaching. If they're looking for first aid tickets or forklift or fall arrest ticket, we can provide funding for that for the clients as well. There's something that they're looking to, have a connection with the employers in Airdrie. My job is trying to connect them with that potential employer. Just say, hey, I have a client that has what you're looking for, and I kind of connect the two of them together, sort of thing. Also, on the employer side, if you're looking to make that tough decision of letting go the employee, we can help with that transition as well, to provide that support in transitioning from an old work job to a new workplace, sort of thing. So that's what we do as far as Career Leap. We are government funded. There is no cost to the employer for me to provide potential staff, and there's no cost to the client for utilizing the program. So.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think it's really important that our industry understand, our business community understand that the resources you offer are in our community. We also have Jennifer here from Prospect Human Services to say a few words on the services that they have within our community. Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. You'll see in my name, Rocky View and Wheatland Employment Services. That's our Airdrie arm. Prospect Human Services is our parent company. So you might hear me go back and forth with the same job, just different titles. We offer similar services to clients that, like Mike was talking about. We offer resume development, job search skills, anything really for clients who are looking for jobs or who are in current jobs and would like to make a change. We work with individuals from ages 14 up. So a lot of people don't realize that youth are welcome to access our services. The only condition, they just need a guardian or a parent to sign off on their application. Now, specifically my job, I work with employers. So our employer services, we offer, the first simple one is job postings. So employers can send me their positions. I'll post them not only to our clients, but I post them on our social media. And that's actually become so successful that we have a number of employers who only come to us because it's local candidates only. They're not going through, 100 resumes through Indeed. We also do hiring events and information sessions. These are about an hour and a half long. For information sessions, we just ask that employers are hiring more than 2 candidates. It can be 2 part-time candidates. There's no obligation to hire as a result of these events. I should mention too, all of our services are at no cost because we're funded by the Alberta government. But these sessions offer you about a 5 to 10 minute opportunity to talk about your organization, who you are, what makes you tick, and then for the remainder of the session to take questions from candidates. And then at the very end, taking resumes. We can also offer actual hiring events. These are all offered online right now. They've been really successful. We did one last week with Rocky View Schools. The HR coordinator was delighted. She said she wants to do another one right away. So they've been really successful. We prepped the candidates ahead of time. So I think the quality of the candidates tends to be a little bit better. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, would like more information. Yeah, that's Rocky View and Wheatland Employment Services.
Thanks, Jennifer. Much appreciated. So now let's move on to the formal presentation today by Peninsula. I'd like to start by thanking Peninsula, of course, for being here today and also for being a value-added member of the Alberta Chamber of Commerce. I'm sure they will get into some of that later this morning, but it is really wonderful. They are offering a fantastic service to our membership at a discount. So Peninsula Canada has been serving the small to mid-sized business sector with award-winning HR and health and safety services across the country since 2017, providing 24-hour resources, advice, documentation, and software. They are a big company backup for a smaller Canadian business. We have Bob and Amanda here today from Peninsula Canada. Amanda is joining us from Toronto. Welcome, Amanda, and Bob from Calgary. Thank you so much for being here. I will hand it over to you if you don't mind. And I know that you do have someone here that can also help with the question and answer period, and I'll let you do the introductions. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Thank you. Yeah, as Marilyn mentioned, we're a value added. Maybe actually I'll start off by saying, when it's 2021 and it's been a difficult, obviously, year, and we've got another difficult year ahead of us. So instead of saying, how are you? Well, let's just say, let's have a better 2021, and we'll leave it at that for everyone. So thanks very much, Marilyn, for the introduction. So today we will be doing a presentation that's quite timely. Amanda and I have collaborated quite a bit over the last year and beyond when we're delivering Peninsula informational sessions like the one that we're going to do. And then we also have Danielle Sundquist, who's also in Calgary. She's one of our senior Alberta HR advisors that works daily with our clients. So what we'll do is we'll do the presentation. I'll introduce Amanda. She'll do the presentation. And then at the end, what we do encourage, because this is an event exclusive for Airdrie and area members that belong to the Chamber of Commerce. So we do encourage interaction. If there's a question, there's no bad questions. We're all going through this together, and every month or every week or every day, sometimes it seems like there's new information, new questions that our clients are asking us. So we're here as a resource. We've got some great content that Amanda Brown will deliver now, and then we'll go through this process, and hopefully we can add some information, some value to your day today. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the Peninsula services at the end. So I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Great, thanks, Bob.
Here.
Just making sure, I really hate saying this, but I feel like I want to say it every time. Can everyone see my screen properly? Everyone, we're good to go? Awesome. I know that's the last thing I'm going to ever want to say when we go back to the real world. So yeah, like Bob mentioned, I want to go through this kind of as quickly as possible, for obviously to respect your time, but also to give you the information that you need. I think the biggest takeaway from this presentation is essentially what kind of things are coming up for your HR and health and safety, how do you apply them, and potentially what could happen if you don't. And then we'll kind of go through any questions that you guys have just based off of whatever is on the screen. And again, if at any time you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. And Bob and Danielle are going to do a job to monitor that today. And I'll kind of just be here giving you guys the information. So we'll start by, we want to kind of get an idea of how many people each of you employ in your business. It definitely changes the landscape of your HR and your health and safety. And it kind of just gives us a good idea. So if I were to say 1 to 10, if you guys want to just click raise your hand, if anyone has 1 to 10 employees, we'll just kind of see what the response is there. I don't see anyone yet, but then we've got a couple coming up, and then 11 to 20, which changes it quite a bit. Darcy, I can see your hands up there. Great. And then finally 20 plus. Do we have anybody who's got 20 plus employees on their hands, which is challenging, I can only imagine. So not necessarily a fun fact, but a fact about Canadian businesses is that these numbers and these sizes of businesses make up the majority of Canadian businesses. And we're seeing a lot of trends in the struggle for these small to medium-sized Canadian businesses as we kind of go through as we've gone through 2020, as we head into 2021. And what we at Peninsula want to do is support these businesses and making sure that they can maintain what they've worked so hard to create. So I don't want to talk too much about Peninsula. It'll waste a bunch of our time. Bob went into it, and so did Marilyn quite a bit. So we launched in Canada. We're a formerly UK company. We essentially are active all over the world, but most recently in Canada. And what we want to do is, again, we want to support the small and medium-sized businesses within Canada with their HR, their health and safety, their documentation. We provide 24/7 advice, and also some protection once we support you in creating all of these things and preparing your platform. So again, one more poll, then we'll get right into it. But who manages the HR and health and safety in your business? So would it be you? If it's you, you can feel free to put up your hand and raise your hand. And then we get into potentially maybe someone on your team. So someone you don't have enough time, but you trust someone to run that for you. Great, awesome. And then outsourced. So some people might have formally outsourced maybe an employment lawyer or someone on the outskirts of your business that helps you with that. So a couple people could be using that option as well. I think the reality about HR and health and safety is many of you and most business owners didn't get into your business to run the HR and health and safety. Personally, my dad is an entrepreneur. He is an engineer, and he decided to start his own commercial HVAC company, and his people are his biggest asset. But at the same time, he's like, this was never what I got into my business to do. So that is another reality of it, is we want to kind of come in and help you with that time. So we'll go through the agenda. So first things first is managing a remote workforce and flexible working arrangements within your business. It's going to change a lot. It has changed. Most of us, I can see from what it seems, are working from home. That may have been the situation before, but it will likely continue to remain the situation for quite a while. Health and safety checklists for on-site and remote staff. So what some people forget is that health and safety extends beyond your physical space of your business. So it extends beyond a restaurant, beyond a factory, beyond whatever it is, especially if you have your employees actually working from home. Lastly is implementing those changes in your contracts and policies. It's great to make these changes and have your employees work from home and allow for more flexibility. But if you're not acknowledging these within your formal contracts, the idea and the risk of that is actually quite large. So you want to just make sure that you're keeping on top of all that so that you've made the adjustments and then you could formally actually introduce them so that you and your employees are covered. And lastly is something that we generally don't like to talk about, but it's our reality, especially in 2020 and 2021, is handling layoffs and terminations and hopefully eventually recalling staff. So considerations for 2021, what I've been saying and what I think everybody else has been saying is all that we know about 2021 is that we don't know. We're kind of all on the edge of our seats, waiting for the next implementation, waiting for the next legislation, whatever that might be. I know in Alberta, you guys are waiting for, I believe it's Bill 70 something, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong. There was a 70 there. Bill 32 was the one that we were dealing with kind of in the midst of the pandemic during 2020, but it's constantly keeping up with everything.
Yeah, Bill 32 was November, and then of course there's some occupational health and safety changes that happened January 1st. So
okay.
To your point, there's constant changes, multiple provinces, multiple changes. So that's the difference.
Right.
To stay on top of it.
Yeah. So I know that there's a quote that says the only constant is change. That we haven't been able to live that as much as we have in the last 2 years or so. So remote working and working from home, what that looks like. I'm not going to read through all this stuff, but you get a general idea. So the idea of what we want to do today, again, is fine, well, we've decided we have to work from home. We have our staff at home. Maybe you have different situations where you have more of a hybrid situation. You have them coming in sometimes and not other times. And there's that exchange of their workspace, so to speak. And then we get into the employee support and engagement, where we're really making sure that we obviously want to play by the rules and we want to make sure that we're covered. But at the end of the day, your employees are going to want to feel safe. And when they feel safe, they're likely going to want to work harder for you. And you just have a better working relationship that creates an easier kind of transition through all of these changes. And then we talk about more of the formal things like the contracts and policies and layoffs and recruitment. And then kind of the penalties that really result if we don't make sure that we keep on top of all these things. Remote working, again, it's here to stay for a little while. There's been a couple studies that suggest that almost over 80% of leaders in their industries expect to provide their employees with more of a flexible working situation and being able to work from home and those kinds of things. And over 50% of employees believe that their employers expect them to be a little bit more flexible. So what we're seeing is kind of an upward trend in the acceptability and the understanding of working from home and realizing that you still can be productive, you still can be as effective, but what that looks like and how to manage that and maintain that is going to look a little bit different. Remote working, first things first that I'll talk about is health and safety, which is a huge one that we kind of forget because you're thinking, well, Sarah works from home all the time. She should know that she shouldn't be standing on one leg for 4 hours during the day while she works. And it's these silly stories that kind of come up, but the reality is once they're working in their space, that extends your due diligence. So things like muscular injuries that result from not having a proper workspace, or there was a story that one of our colleagues told the other day of someone cutting themselves while working from home, and the employer was like, well, do I have to report that? The answer is yes, because they're working on your hours. They're technically working in your workspace, even though it's from home. Tasks and roles outside of the job description. There are lots of, I feel with my experience at least, and a lot of other people's experience with individuals, is that there's two types of people for the most part. People who are like, not on my job description, and other people who are like, I'll take it on, don't worry. I think what you have to do is you have to really make sure that you're going through and you're speaking about that with your employees and you're really highlighting and formally letting everybody know what their roles and responsibilities are and if they've changed. So if you've had to let go of someone and they're taking on a portion of someone else's role or someone else's, you have to formally introduce that into their contract, or else things can come up where, well, it wasn't part of my role, it wasn't part of my duty, and then all of these other things come up, and it's just a challenge that you really don't want to experience. Then we get into accommodation. Working with children is an example. So accommodation is basically your due diligence to accommodate where possible. So if you have an employee who's asking for an accommodation, such as can I start at 10 instead of 9 because I can't. Previous to this, I was taking my child to daycare in the morning, and now they don't have childcare, so I have to take them to school. But that obviously it doesn't work alongside what my hours are. So that's an accommodation that basically you would have to work with that employee. It's not enough to just say, no, it doesn't work for us, because if, say, there's a claim and they come back and they say, well, I asked for this and I didn't get it and they're not treating me properly and all this stuff, you can't really prove that it's without the scope of your business's abilities and capabilities, then you could be held liable for whatever that claim is. Then we get into the different kinds of policies that you can consider, and we'll definitely talk a little bit about that. But remote working policy, if you haven't already introduced it, it's something that you should introduce. I'll show you a couple slides of what certain things look like within that, but they include, for instance, a technology policy. So if you're supplying technology for your staff at home to work from home, are you outlining what they're to do on that technology, if they should shut it off when someone is when they're leaving the room, if they are working with other people, those kinds of things that, especially from an IT perspective and an intelligence perspective, it's your intelligence as your business. It's your baby, right? So if you're not allowing them and letting them know the rules, they could slip and slide wherever they may be. So HR implications of a hybrid workforce. Updating the handbooks and staff contracts, we talked about that a little bit. We want to set clear expectations from the start. So what time are they supposed to be on? What time are they supposed to finish? Everything in between. Ways for employees to clock in and clock out remotely. This might be just a check-in. There might not be a formal sort of app or anything. And there are options for that as well. But it might be, okay, you check in with me at 9 and you just give me a brief 2-minute update before you leave at the end of the day. Things like that. Access technology and security systems. So if you are working with any sort of more secure intelligence within your business, it's definitely, or even payrolls, things like that. If you have someone doing payroll from home, it's people's sensitive information. So it's something that you definitely need to acknowledge. And then finally, something that we forget, so there, I won't go through all of them again, but something that we forget is ensuring a safe home working environment. A lot of people use their work days, their school days, all of those other kinds of days, and as an escape from what could potentially be an unsafe or uncomfortable working environment or home environment. That home environment has now become their work environment. So you just want to make sure that you're constantly connecting with those people, making sure that they know that you're there, they know that they have you to rely back on. And if you're creating those policies, your staff know that you care. You're not creating a policy because you just want to make sure that they're always signing on at 9 o'clock and signing off at 5 p.m. But you're creating a sense of culture where they feel like, okay, they're making these policies because they actually care about my well-being, and it becomes more of a two-way conversation rather than don't do this, do this, and that kind of thing. So again, if you have any questions, I'm kind of trying to breeze through it because it is a lot of content, and I want to make sure that we get through everything. But again, Bob is available after the fact always. You can always look at the recording, but if you have any questions, just reach out to us after. So health and safety checklist for employees that are working from home. This is something that I would really recommend introducing, and it's basically a really one-time, at the beginning at least, an easy way for you to kind of assess what their working from home situation looks like and ensure that it is what you deem as efficient and safe and all of those other things. This is only just a short snippet. I'll just kind of go back and forth through a couple of them. So do they have a dedicated room to work in? Is everything ergonomically positioned? Do the employees have, oh my goodness, my dog is up here. I'm sorry. You need to get down. Sorry, guys. She woke up from her nap. That made it a little bit more human though, or a little bit more, we want to call it that. Okay, so is the lighting appropriate? Are they taking accountability for what they're using to work on their computer? Is it safe overall for them? Those are the kinds of things that you could check in with them about
Yeah.
frequently. And this is just, again, just a snippet. Go
And
ahead,
then
Bob, sorry.
I'll just say real quick, this, there's a theme, as if you can tell, because like I said at the beginning, our content changes drastically because of what's happening with COVID. And if we go back, 10 months ago to March, the topic was, how do you do a temporary layoff?
Mm-hmm.
We got inundated with tons of calls. Then it was, how do you recall staff back? Then, then it was, of course, the lockdowns are fluctuating in every province up and down. And then this piece of content here is really, and all the experts are saying the future of work, of course, is changed forever. Certain industries, and I can tell, certain industries, people that are on the call today, you might be in manufacturing, you might be in financial services, you might be in hospitality. There's different components to every industry, but this one is quite timely because a lot of our clients have a combination of workers or employees that are still doing their regular tasks, and then a part of the sales force or employee force, even the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce. I mean, you're an office environment, and some of you can do your job within the office, some can do at home. Same with us. I'm usually traveling all throughout Alberta, and I'd be sitting in the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce office. But here we are, I'm in my basement in Calgary. So that's why we're kind of, delivering this kind of content. And hopefully everybody can resonate on some level with some of these checklists that are required.
Yeah, and if we even talk about these checklists, if we're talking about if you've got people who are actually working in your physical workspaces still, these checklists could look like COVID checklists, right? So it's checking to make sure that, are you checking temperatures? And what does that look like? Are you checking in on your staff? Are you making sure that they're constantly staying 6 feet away? So the reality is I think just checklist in general is the best initial way to kind of allow your employees to figure out the expectations, because expectations are sometimes the hardest things to communicate, right? So you've communicated your expectations, you've communicated what you are checking for, and then you kind of just really need to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on. So we'll get into control measures. So this is kind of what I was just saying. So you've done all the things you need to do. Your employees are social distancing if they're in your factory. Your employees that are working from home are making sure that they are within a safe space, they're working appropriately, properly, they're not working 17 hours a day. And if they are, you've talked about extra hours, and that may or may not look like overtime, because that's another consideration that you have to think of. A lot of people are working more now, and then they're coming back and saying, well, you owe me overtime. Do I, or was it just you're working, you've just decided that you're working without the hours of your
Amanda, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. I think there's some questions popping up, but
Sure.
we'll just deal with them as we go through, and then
Sure.
Danielle can jump in as well here. So one question from Tara, how do you determine how much accommodation you are required to provide? So Danielle, if you want to jump in and
that one, Tara, you might want to speak on, because she spoke directly when you were saying, Amanda, if someone needs to drive their kids to school and then suddenly they're on a different schedule. Tara, do you have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, because I think it's a gray line to an employee as it is to the company as to what really can't be modified, what we foresee as immovable, and what they see as not a big deal.
It's hard to hear what is being said. Sorry. It's not loud.
Eric, can you just repeat the question, please?
For us, I'm curious, because I think there's a big difference between what an employee believes is a movable thing that a company might say, I'm sorry, it's not okay to be 15 minutes late. So, from the childcare perspective, dropping kids at school, I hired you and these were the hours I gave you. So at some point, or these are the expectations you were hired with, at some point, where is that line where you can just say, this doesn't work?
Okay, so there's a couple things with that. You have to be careful because this crosses human rights. And so you, as an employer, you have a duty to accommodate up until undue hardship. Now, proving undue hardship can be years. Now, that being said, too, if they're like, hey, my childcare is canceled and I am struggling to find something, you can say, okay, for the next 4-6 weeks, we can accommodate, but by that point, we are going to require you to go back to your other schedule. And if they come back again and like, I still can't, you can say proved and show me that you're doing everything in your power. So we even had a colleague in that situation, and where she worked and lived, she literally went through every facility for her daughter and they couldn't find something. And so for her, they blocked that 15-minute, she can't take a meeting for those 15 minutes at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, just because she has to go get her daughter because her husband, he owns his own business, and there's no, the way it works, it doesn't work, right? So it's about finding, you can ask for proof that they can't find another childcare. Those elements can be asked, but you do in those circumstances can give someone an ability, a time frame to try and assist. If not, then we're looking at further conversations.
The follow-up question to that, Danielle, is
Yes.
I'm just reading Elaine's
Yeah,
comment.
I see that. I have it open. Yes, because they're not working, you would be able to reduce it, or you can tell them they can make it up on, if instead of, now barring they can, that they can work on the other end of it, right? So let's say they drop them off and their husband's picking them up. If they can work 15-30 minutes later, then you can have it just the entire schedule shift. If that's not the case, then you can say, okay, when they clock in, or if the salary employee, we will be reducing it that 30 minutes per day because you're not working and not meeting your contractual agreement. It's best to have something written and saying, because you're not working, and we're signing off on this reduction for that time. It's also, again, important to say it's temporary until we get these agreement in place. So I'm trying to read questions and speak at the same time.
Mhm.
Bad combination. And then I did see one. What is about the staff calling in sick? I don't know who asked that one. Is
Yeah,
that
that was Mike. Yeah, go ahead, Danielle.
Mike? Yeah. So if cough is calling in sick, it's the same policy. Whatever you have in your policy book, it's still the same procedure. It's still what you have in place. If you don't have anything in place, Alberta Employment Standards is 5 unpaid days, and you can follow that. Again, it is always best to get that employee handbook in place so the employees understand. Again, if it's a shift, if it's something that needs to clock in, clock out, have your policy in place saying that they need to call you 2 hours before, that type of thing. But it would be the same process from working from home, being sick, as it is the office.
Does that help, Mike? Okay.
So about the liability of them coming in late, like I said, you have a duty to accommodate until undue hardship. It literally has taken companies 5-6 years to prove that undue hardship. So just saying that, oh, financially it's a little bit hard, isn't enough. They potentially will, if they take you to human rights, they will say, did you try this? Have you done that? Have you tried this? They will go through a laundry list, which could take years. And that entire time you will be required to pay your employee.
All good. Again, if there are any questions, I can't see any of them coming up because I'm sharing my screen. So please just.
Yeah, it says the next one says Terra Forest would be unsupervised kids at performing arts school. Well, then you would have to potentially look at seeing if there's another person that you can schedule for that time and shorten their hours to the middle of the day. There's different elements that you'd have to look at the scheduling element. Again, that's where you'd set a time frame for them to say you need to, adjust and find someone. Otherwise, this isn't working for the company. So you're showing that as your employer, you're doing your due diligence, you're giving them an opportunity, you're accommodating. So you're reaching all those boxes. And then ultimately, in the end, if they can't do it, then we're having a further conversation about this.
Okay. Thanks, Danielle.
My pleasure.
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
Great. Okay. So actually that leads right into what I was going to talk about next. So we'll just kind of breeze through that because it's flexible working arrangements. So exactly what Danielle was just saying is just kind of creating that environment. So what are they? She just spoke to it. So it's maybe someone starting at 9:15, ending at 5:15 rather than their 9 to 5, whatever that looks like. The benefit obviously is that you're creating a culture of kind of comfortability and confidence in your employees, but there are realities that can't that can't happen, right? So certain businesses don't allow for that sort of little break and that flexible working arrangement. So you just kind of need to figure out along the lines of what Danielle was saying, where your business fits in and what the request is. If you're looking to make a flexible working arrangement, here's what we would normally suggest. So obviously an informal discussion, hey, I've got to pick up my daughter. That's what that looks like. Again, Danielle mentioned, okay, well, we'll do this for 4 weeks. And then by the end of the 4 weeks, we'll either see if it works for both of us, both the business and yourself. B, we'll formalize it. So we'll put this into some sort of contract and then we'll update it for you. And again, a reminder is that you're not obligated to accept any of the flexible working requests, but you want to make sure that you have your duty to accommodate and you're making sure that you've made any accommodations as much as possible, especially I would say during these conditions and these kinds of conditions across the world. So what do you need to have in place? Updated policies, obviously, like we talked about, records. So a lot of people are, you have these conversations via text or whatever, as long as you're acknowledging them. Sometimes a better way to do it sometimes is you have a conversation over the phone, you send a follow-up email acknowledging what the conversation was, and you save those within your records. So that way you're basically giving a list so that if anything were to happen, you can go through and say, no, we had that conversation here, it's right here. No, we had that conversation here, it's right here. So just making sure that you're really keeping on top of that, because if you can't prove that a conversation was had because it's not in your contracts or whatever, then technically to a larger body, it doesn't count and it didn't happen. Good communication, like anything else in human resources and really just people in general, is if you're communicating it properly to your staff, maybe you have these rules that you're putting into place, and you obviously have your social distancing, and you don't want too many people in the break room, and maybe there's rules for the bathroom. If you have people coming in and out of a workplace like a factory or a restaurant, you want to make sure that you're posting things in places that people can see so that you've done everything possible to communicate this. You're passing it along via email. You're making, maybe it's even a checklist where you can have a list of all the people and you basically are just checking in with them. Did you see this? Did you see this email, or did you see this communication? That way you know that they're able to actually recognize it and acknowledge that they've seen it. A lead representative. So all this means is somebody that they can go to for all of this. So generally, I'm assuming that most of you are on the call because you have some sort of involvement in what these HR and OHS practices look like. And I think the reality is employees just need somebody to be able to go to so that they feel confident in whatever they're doing at whatever time that they need. And a future plan. So IT infrastructure, obviously that changes for every person. IT infrastructure could mean one laptop for one business, and it could mean a whole slew of other things for another business. So making sure that you have that support to allow people to work from home, which I think at this point, if you have had people to work from home, you've gone through that already. Future plan, realistically, I think the best way to plan for the future is to plan for right now and to make sure that you've got all your bases covered right now, because then it's less of a catch up. So it's less, oh shoot, I didn't put that in place and now I have to do that and this. I know in Ontario, and it's probably very different, but I know in Ontario they're doing blitzes right now in small businesses, which seems like just kind of taking a dagger and twisting it a little bit. But they also have to make sure that everybody who is in those businesses feels safe, and that's their job at the end of the day. So planning for that just makes it much easier in the future if anything were to come up. And then an HR advisor on top. So again, that can look very different, whether it's a resource for you. Bob is obviously a great resource. Danielle is a resource that our clients essentially would have access to 24/7. So if something comes up, I don't know if you were working on Christmas, Danielle, but maybe you were, maybe you weren't. But if something comes up on Christmas Day where you've got a question you need answered, that would be Danielle's one of many of Danielle's jobs. But to answer those questions, we have specific lines for our clients just to make sure that everyone feels covered and confident at all times. So kind of one of our last polls is, have you updated your policies in the last 3 months to include certain items that we'll kind of go over later? So if you want to just kind of put your hand up, whether you have or not. Okay, we're seeing some things. I think I'm seeing questions come through as well. I just see a little flashing box. So again, Bob or Danielle or Marilyn, feel free to stop me at any time
No, that's fine. You can just respond in the
Got
chat.
it. Okay, great. So I have it big on my screen because on the little screen down here, it's hard to see. These are only some of all of the policies that you really need to have in your business. So you've got dress policy, CCTV policy, which is super important if you do have any sort of cameras within your workplace and you are recording people. People need to know about that. There are stories of people having theft and then saying, well, we saw you on the cameras, but they didn't let these employees know that there were cameras and they were not held responsible for stealing. So sickness policy, some of these I'm sure you guys have, and a lot of them you've seen before. Again, we've kind of gone over this, so I won't stay with it too much, but how do you communicate your changes? So be transparent. These changes to policies are not for you so that you can take advantage of your employees. And as long as they know that, oftentimes you might feel like it's the opposite. You're creating these policies so that you don't feel like you're going to be taken advantage of. So it's just basically being transparent, having that conversation. So this is where we want to introduce a new dress policy from work from home, because maybe some people are not coming to work dressed appropriately. And it's what do you as an employee feel is reasonable for us to ask for you guys to dress when you're at home?
Yeah, and I'll just add about the policies because some of the comments are coming through, which this is not unexpected. A lot of you are working on policies or haven't updated policies, and we hear that regularly with clients that we onboard. Is that it's just so overwhelming to stay on top of what the changes are that are happening right now through Alberta labor standards, even through occupational health and safety. And what we regularly hear is, we have policies from 5 years ago. I think they're okay. Maybe they're covering us, but now there's this overwhelming sense of anxiety on the employer's part and employees, obviously, but the employers that we deal with every day, they're anxious, they're stressed because they're not clear on if they're doing things properly and correctly, if they're compliant, and if they're mitigating risks. So the idea behind the policies is that they need to be specific and relevant to your business and your industry. Some policies are going to be very similar as that previous screen to all industries. But really, when it comes down to it, a working from home policy is going to be super important for, let's say, a computer software business where they have 20 employees and they can do their jobs from home versus a restaurant. So the idea is to tailor make the policies so that they fit and they're relevant and they mitigate risk, protect the employer, and set up the structure for the employees as well, so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, great. So I think, I'm just I want to make sure that we get through everything. Contracts and employee handbook. So I've highlighted 3 here that are obviously likely changes that have just come about in the last year or so. So remote work, if you didn't really have people, I mean, I can't even think of if Peninsula had a remote work policy for like certain people, right? So I wouldn't have had a remote work policy because I was always in the office. I wasn't ever working remote. Bob may have been differently because he was traveling quite a bit. So his contract and employee handbook would have been slightly different. But I think the reality is now all these things are coming into play. Again, I mentioned information technology and usage. Depends a lot on the work that you're doing and who you've got working for you and what the work is from home. But yeah, it's a reality is people are going to use their computers for things that you probably don't align with your business, especially if there's sensitive information on the computers that you're giving people. You want to make sure that they're using it properly.
Quick question from Marilyn for Danielle here. This is a really good one actually, and we've had this conversation amongst our sales force and amongst our entire company over the last few months. And the question is, could there be a policy on your office layout during Zoom calls? For example, clean background. We just had this conversation in our meeting last week where people were playing around with different technologies within Zoom. For example, you can blur your background, you can do this. But so can the employer mandate that, if you are working from home, you're doing these Zoom meetings, you have to have a specific background written as a policy.
Yeah, I mean, you can always say to your employees, hey, we want you to use a blurred one, or we want to use the same one, so that we're company. You can even, some of them, you can upload your own like company image for the background, and then it'd be your company background. But you can, a lot of times the policy refer to like a professional work environment. So that would define like having a clean, professional looking space
Is
for
it-
when
are
you're
we-
on Zoom.
Are we crossing the line? Can an employer mandate to the employee that if you're doing Zoom calls and you're representing our company, then you must have this particular screen
That
saver
would be
background?
that professional, right? That professional element.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, super interesting. And it's something, a lot of these things, at least I know, and I've had the conversation with clients before, with even my dad, for instance. He's like, how do you wouldn't think that you'd need to introduce these policies or tell people that maybe they shouldn't have certain things behind them, or maybe not have their dog jump up on their shoulder when they're giving a presentation. But it's things that, these kinds of things come up, and it's better to be prepared than to not be prepared at all. Okay, so quickly touch base on, and I think we've all, this topic has been, I wouldn't say exhausted, because I don't think that mental health can be exhausted, especially in times like these. But so just to briefly go over a stat that a lot of us know, unfortunately, 1 in 5 people experience mental illness, which means that if you have above 5 employees, the chances are is that one of your employees could be struggling. And at the end of the day, if your employees are struggling, it affects their work, and that in turn affects your business. So that's kind of very high level, what we kind of advise. And obviously there are certain things like EAPs, which are employee assistance programs. We don't have access to those massive EAPs, but I was giving an example the other day of, I know a woman who downloaded the Calm app and gave it to her employees for Christmas. So it's little things like that that might be able to bridge that gap, and you can have those conversations, and just really making sure that you're touching base with your employees consistently. I think everybody got to this, like, well, we could still be there, but Zoom fatigue, right? So people don't want to be on camera anymore. They don't want to talk to people on camera anymore. And so what ended up happening, at least I know for our teams, is we weren't doing it really at all. And then we weren't really connecting unless you needed to. And then you can't really keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on with your employees, especially if they're working from home. Keeping an eye on symptoms of mental health deterioration or mental illness, which is, if you do have employees coming in and out of a workspace, a lot easier to kind of notice, but still keep an eye on it if you have employees that are at home. So layoffs, when are they appropriate for you? Layoffs are obviously appropriate. Generally, it's financial hardship that causes the need for a layoff. So there are lots of risks to watch out for. We could have an entire 4-hour presentation on the risks of layoffs in general, but essentially you need to I would recommend, and I'm sure Danielle would recommend, and Bob, layoff clause. So there are different types of layoff clauses. They look a little bit different, but you really want to make sure that you have that policy, because if you don't, then that layoff becomes quite a bit more difficult. And then you're running into certain claims and disputes and really conversations that you don't want to be having. And the right steps to lay off an employee. So obviously the first is to have it within documentation that you're allowed to do so, and you're provided to do so. And then it could happen in many different ways. Sometimes it's a verbal conversation that then obviously needs to be acknowledged formally among the terms whichever terms you decide within your clause. And then you want to discuss, so it depends on what province you're in, obviously. So you guys are in Alberta, there are different legislations and laws for layoffs, and what you need to kind of have aligned before you do so and after you do so, and what those conversations look like. Does anybody have any questions on layoffs right now? We might as well discuss them if people have questions, and we've got Danielle.
Or the changes that have happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You're best to put the layoff clause in your contract, not in your handbook. Examples, recently there was a case where a contract had the termination clause in the employee handbook. and not the employment contract. And because it was given after the start of employment, they're deemed to no longer have given up their common law rights. And so by doing so, it's the same thing with layoff. Now, we in Alberta do have one catch. We are very fortunate that if we provide proper written notice with the proper section of employment code and the letter, we can do a layoff at any time. BC and Ontario actually have to have that clause in their contract. If they don't have so, the employees have to sign off and agree. So in the last bill too, we originally had to give 1 week's notice if anyone was under 2 years employment, and 2 weeks notice for layoff if they were over that time frame. The nice thing is, and then they had like the Act of God clause, which would fall under COVID. Bill 32, Bill 32, why do I want to say Bill 2? Bill 32 got rid of that notification, but the written requirement's still the same. We in Alberta, if it's COVID related, it's up to 180 days. If it is regular, just seasonal, like things are just slow, it's 90 days and 120-day period, which can be extended if you continue paying their benefits from the very beginning. Again, all documented in that layoff letter.
Danielle, there's a quick question from Tara. Is there a generic layoff clause we can include?
I mean, it's a layoff saying that pretty much like employers have the right to go, employers have the right to do a layoff. Again, anything legal contract wise, I would advise against you drafting yourself and having either a lawyer or a company like ourselves, which we have internal legal, review and draft those type of clauses for contracts.
Yeah, the whole concept of layoffs is very, very new for the majority of businesses across the country now. In most provinces, there's certain exemptions, like in the construction industry, for example, where you can lay off, you can have various layoffs at any time for any reason because of the nature of that industry, in the construction industry. But what we're experiencing with our clients now in all other industries is, they're, even if they're mandated by the government to do a layoff, where does that fit in your documentation, your contracts, your employee handbooks? So now people are kind of retooling their organizations and saying, if this happens again, let's be prepared. So yes, let's write in a properly written layoff clause for our business, for our industry. Can there be a general one? Well, I think to Danielle's point is, you can make reference that you have the right as the employer to do a layoff, but then it opens up a whole other can of worms of, well, what are the requirements beyond that? So that's where, getting something tailor-made comes into play and saying, okay, let's write this properly. There was another question that came up.
Do people modify annually their contracts? Not normally, because contracts let's say you give me a new contract, you actually have to offer me consideration to sign a new contract. So if you do that annually, you're all of a sudden going to be paying quite a bit. Again, if you do it annually and you're doing an annual raise, they can tie together, and those are type of things that would be counted as consideration. So some people will update it every once in a while, every couple of years when things really change, or if they're about to do mass hiring, again, they'll get either a lawyer or get new contracts so that they are up to date. And then, like I said, then you can offer the existing employees with consideration to do one. I recommend some people.
There's maybe we'll let Amanda just finish off. I think we're pretty close to the end, and then there's another couple of questions that we can get to right at the end. So I'll let you finish off, Amanda, and then I think the questions are relevant and timely. So
okay, great. Yeah, I won't talk too much about health and safety considerations, just because we've talked about that quite a bit. So you obviously have to have the right policies. You have to, whether they're working from home or within your space, you need to have the right policies, and needs to cover especially everything COVID related. And then obviously we talked about communication. And again, the idea with communication and creating these policies is that everyone has the expectations kind of from the get-go. You're on the same page, and it just allows you to move forward with your business as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about the penalties. Pretty common, obviously financial burden. So if you have a claim against you, you lose, or even spending the time hiring a lawyer, those kinds of things, the financial burden can be extreme in a lot of cases. Legal costs, time. The reality about all of these issues is that they cost you time, and time is money. If you were to look at what it takes to actually efficiently and effectively write a contract and policy, which we don't suggest, but many of the people are doing it because they don't have another option and it's taking up all of their time. Low staff morale, if people don't know the expectations and then they're being held accountable for things, it just creates this gray area that doesn't suit anybody's working conditions whatsoever. Adverse publicity, this is something that we've seen kind of across the board constantly with HR and OHS and health and safety. So realistically, a lot of people, and it depends on what type of business you have, but a lot of the time in communities, that everybody knows everybody. So once one thing passes on, then the other thing passes on. And those are just a slew of really issues that you can run into right away. The other is obviously statutory bodies such as Canada Revenue. So people asking certain questions like, can I pay some of my staff in cash so that they can still collect CERB? That's a whole other type of issue, but an HR issue nonetheless. The answer is no. And any of these jumping out or outside of any of these boxes that the law wants to keep you in could result in being reported to any of these bodies. So now we can kind of get into next. So I'll go to questions first, just so that we've got a little bit of time. Yeah. And I'll let you guys kind of take it away.
Okay. Yeah, there was another one. Why don't you go ahead and read out the question?
Yeah, so will you speak to reducing hours and how do you document that? To reduce hours, now, if you have a clause, Alberta has, under the Employment Standard Code, it says if you notify the employee before the pay cycle, you can actually reduce hours or wages. Now, it is best to have such clause in your contract, otherwise you're not tied to it. Then you would have to follow common law, which would be provide notification under that, which is a minimum of 2 weeks per year of employment, or have a conversation with your employees and have them sign off on it, saying they agree to the wage reduction and they're effective starting such and such date. If they are, you want to have, like I said, you always want to have the documentation. So whether a notification letter saying that in such and such time frame, your salary will reduce. Again, if your contract refers to the Employment Standard Code, then you can reduce it based on the code itself. Repeating layoffs for regular one, it's 90 days within a 120-day period. So if you cut out a 120-day period, they can't be off for more than 90 days. So it can repeat. Like I said, it just can't be more than 90 days in the 120-day period. It's like no different than going to the US. You can only be in the States, what is it, whatever, 179 days or something like that in the 365. It's the same idea of that if they took out that chunk of calendar, they'd have to match it. Can we still use the concept of regular schedule hour in a pandemic when hours are vary widely? It is best, again, to have in your contract that your hours may vary based on operational needs. That is a very good clause. That means that it allows you as an employer to schedule the hours based around what you need. Again, if there's going to be a dramatic change, have the employee sign off on it or consider laying it off. Or another one is if you have multiple employees doing the same role, consider looking at the federal work share program. That would allow you to have the employees still actively working, and then the program pays for the time that they're off. And as you continue to work and have them work more, they then claim less on the government side.
Right. Okay. Is there any audio questions? If anybody wants to ask an audio question, or we can just check the chat box. Well, I know we're right at just before 12 o'clock. We're trying to keep it to an hour. I think we're okay to go for a few extra minutes if anybody wants to ask any further questions.
Tara's asking if they can get contact information for you, Bob.
Yeah, I think Amanda.
She has to go to another call.
Sure. Amanda, if you can go to the next.
And with respect to contact information for Peninsula, Ashley will be sending out the video link tomorrow, as well as a survey, along with the contact information to those at Peninsula. So you will be receiving all of that in an email within the next 24 hours.
I'll just do a quick 10-second wrap up then. So once again, we want to respect everyone's time. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the opportunity to present the information. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, Danielle.
My pleasure.
This is a 5-second summary of what we do, but we've been at it for almost 40 years, 40. So documentation, advice, software. We have some fantastic proprietary HR software that can do a variety of different things. And then something that is quite unique in Canada, we just launched in September of 2020, which is called Peninsula Protect. Because of the nature of what we're experiencing now, get your documentation, get your support, have some great software. But if something still goes wrong within your organization in terms of a claim against the business from an employee or an ex-employee, we have in-house counsel where we can step in and support you with legal fee coverage. So that's real quick. I'd love to have one-on-one conversations with anyone else that's interested in finding out more about Peninsula services. And like Marilyn said, I'll have my contact information. Ashley will send that out. And another reminder, of course, is because you're a member of the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce, we have some exclusive pricing specifically for the members. So once again, we really appreciate it. If there's any more questions, one last question. We're here for a couple of minutes.
Thank you so much. I just want to add that this won't be the last of Peninsula. We will be inviting them back later this year. And hopefully Bob will actually be able to come out in person at some event in the future. So thank you so much to Amanda, Bob, and Danielle for joining us. That was a ton of great information, as you mentioned, jam-packed into a very short period of time.
Great. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you very much. For the rest of the week.
I just have a few last minute updates on behalf of the Chamber. Next week, we are actually giving away 5 $1,000 grants through our Heart Airdrie Toque campaign. So watch for the announcement on the businesses that will be recipients of that grant. I had also mentioned in the chat box, we are hosting a virtual mental health workshop on February 9th. Stay tuned for that. And on February 25th, we will have a virtual lease workshop, and that will be helping negotiate commercial leases and renewals, of course, during these very challenging times. So thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing you all throughout 2021. Stay safe and well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.